One of the things that impacts us all the time as humans is our stress reaction. And fundamentally, it's two of the F's, fight or flight. An example is when we do the fight response, then we attack others. When we do the flight response, there are people who do the flight response and they attack themselves. My observation is that managers need to be emotionally self-aware and also do the work on themselves to heal their psychological, mental, emotional injuries so that they then can not offload that onto the people that are working for them.
Hello and welcome back. Welcome to another episode of the Finding Equilibrium show. I'm delighted to be here and delighted that you're here and delighted to have my guest. My guest today is Bill Carson. And Bill, you've had a lot of things I could say about you, but you're the founder of Inspire Learning. You're a mental health advocate. You've had a very rich career in business, doing all kinds of roles. And I know you do a lot of voluntary work and very pleased that you're here. And for people who don't know you, I'd love you to take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself properly to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. It's delightful to be here and sharing this with you. About Bill Carson, this part of my journey at being very focused and passionate about mental health, safety in the workplace. It comes from particularly the last 5 years when I started doing lifeline volunteer telephone crisis support. For me, I came out of a challenging period and wanted to give of my gift and give to others. And I'm, constantly committed to that. I've got a shift tomorrow. I do a shift every fortnight. And then I started doing mental health first aid workshops. And through working with a lot of leaders, managers, and delivering mental health first aid, I've become absolutely passionate that every manager on the planet should do mental health first aid. For the reasons we can talk about later in terms of the skills that it teaches leaders. And then prior to that, my own personal journey has been very much, if I go kind of right back to the beginning, I had major heart surgery when I was 4. The following year, when I was 5, my father died in a car accident, and that was incredibly traumatic. And my mother was a mother. She was 26. She had 4 kids. She lost her husband. And that was incredibly traumatic for her. And I don't have any memory of my mother consoling me through my grief because she was so embroiled in her own. And then my mum married a mate of my father's, and he really struggled. And there was a lot of domestic violence through my teenage years. And that explains for me why I really struggled when I went to uni. Because knowing what I know now around early childhood trauma, the impacts that has on us when we go through major transitions, primary school to secondary school to uni or work, etc. And while a lot of people really massively struggle from COVID transitions and losing work and changing jobs, etc., etc. And then I worked in manufacturing roles for a lot of years, in technical and leadership roles. And then I always had a really strong interest and passion around psychology and teaching. I didn't do it at uni for a whole raft of reasons. I did a science degree. I majored in metallurgy. But then about in the mid-90s, I then converted over to the training industry. And then now for the last 5 years, the divine plan has kicked in. And I'm working in the area of education and psychology and that whole kind of area, which I'm very passionate about.
Yes, no, I know. And that's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm sorry you had such a traumatic start to your life. But that kind of really provides the context, because often people draw on that experience to be able to help others. And you touched on something around managers and how I'm trying to remember your words, that every manager should have some kind of training. What experiences, like what led you to that conclusion?
Yeah. So I've started to really understand at a very fundamental level, one of the things that impacts us all the time as humans is our stress reaction. And fundamentally, it's two of the F's: fight or flight. And so what happens? A lot of people talk about this only in terms of physical preservation, but we're massively we're social beings. And so it's operational in a social context all the time as well. So an example is when we do the fight response, then we attack others. When we do the flight response, there are people who do the flight response and they attack themselves. So I'll give you a classic example. And it was just today. I was having a coaching session with a relatively a mid-level to senior manager. And she reports to two managers, and these two managers are both at the extremes. One manager has had two relatively senior people leave recently, and fundamentally what happened was that these people weren't happy with this more senior manager. They expressed their points of view. Her response to them was, "If you don't like it, you can leave." That's a fundamental example of the stress reaction of attack others. And then the other manager, she's got running an attack self. "I'm not good enough." So what happens is this manager is very, very capable, demonstrates capability. The more senior manager doesn't handle it appropriately, gets jealous or whatever, up comes a stress reaction, and doesn't engage and support the person working for her. She shuts her down. And this kind of leads into the whole theme, from my observation, is that managers need to be emotionally self-aware and also do the work on themselves to heal their psychological, mental, emotional injuries so that they then can not essentially offload that onto the people that are working for them.
So interesting. So it's very much, because what you're saying really is, in the same way that you've had that emotional trauma that led to your own journey, everyone's got their own emotional trauma. It will just be different. And when you put us in a work context, then we react in the way you described. I'd never actually thought of fight or flight in the way you just actually described it. It's so interesting. So I guess before we get into solutions, I'd love to almost expand on that, because that's a very real example. And, we often hear about creating psychologically safe workplaces, and that's really important. Now, Wellbeing at Work conferences, we talk about that a lot, and there's lots of really good case studies, and we talk about the importance of emotional intelligence as a key skill, and the importance of resilience and being able to adapt. What often I feel people struggle with, and I'd love you to maybe unpick this, is connecting that concept, psychological safety, with actually a reality. If I'm a manager and a leader, and I was along part of my career, I had responsibility for a lot of people, and I would listen to things like that, and I would think, but how can I do it? You come back to this, am I good enough? Am I a good manager? How can I do it? So I'd love you to expand on that, to turn the concept, which can sound very theoretical, into the reality of the day-to-day, given all the pressures. And I have to say that I do have a lot of support for the managers, because often the managers get it in the neck, or the leaders get it in the neck if the culture isn't, thriving on well-being. So I'd love you to share some of your experiences of other problems that organizations are struggling with, and how they can move forward, or take small steps forward towards a healthier culture that supports their people from a mental well-being perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back further then to why I'm hugely passionate about managers learning mental health first aid is because they will learn themselves essentially kind of what the landscape looks like. Absolutely, they're not being taught how to be therapists or whatever. And what's really critical about this is that what happens for a manager is essentially you pay the big bucks to solve problems. Like, welcome to the planet, that's your job. And people who are in management roles either are there because, they're technically very smart, they might be quite ambitious, etc. And they can solve problems. So when there's problems that are task related to be solved within the business, it's your job essentially as the manager to solve them. But welcome to planet Earth, human beings are showing up with all kinds of challenges that we have. And then, so if a team member is struggling, and we've all been there, we all have challenges in our lives, then if you apply a manager brain concept to connecting in, then you're fundamentally coming from a place of, I've got to solve the problem. No, you don't. It's not your problem to solve. This is a human being that's, struggling and challenged, etc. And I make the point, the brain's just another body part. So if this person was showing up with, let's say, some lower back pain or some abdominal pain or an arm pain or whatever, you don't try and diagnose. You just really encourage them, say, you need to go to the doctor, or, to encourage them to go to the doctor. And so in the same way, when someone is struggling with, challenges, like just recently I heard of a guy whose both parents are really unwell at the moment. And that's a big worry, and it's going to impact on your work. Fortunately, his GM just really understands and is, supporting him to, work through that as he, struggles through that. But recognizing that their support could either be through his doctor or through the employee assistance provider service, etc. So that's a really important part. And then what happens then in the psychological safety component is then as a leader, as a manager working with people, then if you haven't resolved your own stress response, stress reactions, and haven't sort of healed your own psychology and your own sort of trauma. Like, there's a whole bunch of people who have the attack others who fundamentally have the point of view, I'm better than. And then all the people who are coming from attacking self, they're fundamentally coming from less than. So all the people who are better than, they essentially run the racket of I've always got to be right. And so if you've got a group of people, you've got these smart, intelligent human beings showing up in your team, and really good psychological safety is where the manager can pull out their ego and allow the group to be the best they can, where you can have high intellectual friction but low social friction, because there's an emotional safety that's created. So really good psychological safety has, number one, inclusion safety. Number two, it has learner safety. Number three, it has contributor safety. And then number four, challenger safety. And this is so far for me in my research the best work that I've seen in the context of psychological safety, which has been developed by Dr. Tim Clark out of the US.
Cool. That's incredibly interesting. So let's just pick into those a little bit deeper. So you're saying a psychologically safe environment has got those things. So just so that I understand what you're saying, it's inclusion safety. I feel included.
Yeah.
Learner safety. I feel I'm learning. I'm increasing my knowledge. I can't read my own writing. What was the third one?
Contributor.
Okay. I feel I'm contributing. And then the last one, challenger. What's challenger safety that you feel?
Challenger safety is the safety to challenge the status quo. One of the things that, before coming across this, and I've been doing the mental health first aid work for a little while, One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is the huge differences between anxiety and depression. They fundamentally just get all, slapped together all the time, but they're very, very different things that happen to us. So anxiety is fundamentally a future orientation, which is, uncertainty, stress about the future. And it can happen sort of momentarily, everything from being cut off in traffic when we used to drive cars, pressures around work and stuff like that. And the way we're developed is that we have our physiological responses, our nervous system responses, etc. The other biggie is depression. Now, just at a very high level, without getting sort of super technical on it or clinical, is that one of the best ways to kind of think about depression is that it's correlated with loss experiences, particularly emotional loss. So one of the things that our culture does really, really poorly is that we don't honor the experience when we lose someone very close to us, because we're highly social beings. We form these attachments, and the attachments get broken. Either a relationship breaks up, or we have death of loved ones and so forth. And it's incredibly painful. And what our culture does, and not only ours but a lot, is you wait a few days, you have a funeral, then have a party, and then that's it. And like everyone else goes off, but the person who's experiencing the grief and the sadness and the loss, that just goes on for ages. Now, the point I make is the brain's just another body part. So that injury is like exactly the same. Like 3 years ago, I busted my knee in a surfing accident. I did the ACL, the MCL, the meniscus, and then I had to go to the physio and work with my personal trainer for months to have rehab to actually heal that injury. And people need months to heal their emotional injuries. And so if we don't understand that, we won't allow the process. So here's then a classic sort of simple example of all that. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is the incredible stress of actually starting a new job. And this is where inclusion safety is incredibly important. So let's say, Lawrence, you start a new job. So what happens is your anxiety comes up because all of the uncertainty, how am I going to do? How am I going to fit in? There's so much to learn to get up to speed. Also, what happens then is the sense of the depression, the loss experience, because at your previous work, you had lots of expertise, you knew people, you had relationships, you had attachments and connection to your expertise. And now you don't have any of that, and you're just starting off brand new. So that's one set of issues. The other is that the way we are as humans is that you're the outsider now that's coming into our group. And so we as a group, we're all safe, but you're the new person. And so what will come up is our stress reaction because we don't know you. And then we're going to be, checking you out and like make some pretty quick decisions. And I used to make this mistake all the time. I'd be hiring people and just say, okay, Lawrence, you work with Jack, and Jack will bring you up to speed, or, go work with the team. That is just so insane. Inclusion safety is that we connect you in with everybody one-on-one. You don't do it as a group. So let's say you'd spend some time with me, you'd spend some time with Jenny, you'd spend some time with Tom, and build the social connection. And so we get to know you, one-on-one. And then when we all know you and you feel safe, included, and a sense of belonging, you can then down-regulate your whole stress reaction, and then you'll operate out of your smart brain and you'll come up to speed so much faster.
So interesting. It feels, when I listen to you speak, it feels that we have a lot of psychologically unsafe places to work because we don't do any of these things. So interesting. Just moving that conversation on now, because we've got psychological safety in the workplace. But of course, the workplace now could be anywhere. Like at the moment, most people are working at home and doing office kind of work. So are there things that we need to do differently to accommodate that, to allow true psychologically safe workplaces when we are removed? And I know in conversations I've been having, people feel anxious because they no longer have awareness. One woman described how she used to watch people going into her boss's office, and then that would create a story, or about what that conversation was about, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Suddenly that channel has gone, and that's creating some anxiety in this person. So I'd love you to share any techniques that you're familiar with that could help people create psychological safe workplaces, given the new hybrid way of working, which I don't think is going to change dramatically, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, there's this continuum of well-being and psychological safety and mental health, and they all kind of flow in together. And interestingly, psychological safety is really just the new, in a sense, the kind of new name, and it's been around for quite a while for mental and emotional safety, because just as of August in 2021, the ISO have brought out the new standard 45003, which is called Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, guidance around psychosocial hazards. So, so from the context of people working from home, it's really interesting that a lot of the data is identifying that quite a lot of people have kind of got used to it. So the thing I've done a lot of workshops in this whole area, and the fundamental thing I joke about is that all the introverts kind of love it. It's like, because it used to drive them nuts, at work, with people coming and going and talking too much and not respecting their space. So they're like happy days. It's the extroverts that are going stir crazy. It's like, because where's my audience? Where's my water cooler? Where's all people I can talk to? so that kind of needs to be taken into consideration. And the other is that just the whole change process for us as humans, it will always bring up the stress reaction. And that's okay. It's just how we effectively work through it and manage through it. But often what's really difficult is the fact that, it gets imposed on us, or with people without managers and so forth, without the ability to kind of, work through and discuss the various things that can be done. So the sorts of things that can be done is, all the important things that we've identified already, which is maintaining connections, maintaining relationships, and as I've touched on earlier, the manager's capacity, like if I was managing you, Lawrence, would be to have a connecting in, how's Lawrence going conversation, where I take off my manager hat and connect in with you as, another human being, and just having a chat. And then if for example, you are kind of like, struggling in bed or frustrated or annoyed, I can just be present with you. I don't have to solve your problem. I don't have to then think, oh my God, there's something wrong. We can just be present. And then I can ask you around what resources that you're using to support you, and then maybe give you guidance around the things that you can do. And then, supporting you to kind of get back into your happy place, and away we go. Mm. And, again, brain's just another body part. Sometimes it might be a relatively easy thing to do, or might be quite complex. Mm. And some people kind of say, oh, I can't have those conversations. If we were in physical presence, I could do it. Well, that's just a point of view, because, you can do it on the phone, you can do it by text, but, phone or, this medium, physical presence is equally as effective.
Yes, that's good. I think what comes up for me when you speak is that a lot of us will feel we can't do something because we're not used to doing it. But if we've learned anything, a lot of the things that were perceived to be impossible have become possible. So we can have all kinds of it may not be your preferred channel, platform, but with experience and with practice, you can definitely have very good conversations, and it's better than nothing. And so, if you can't meet in person, then we've got this huge platform, which is amazing, and your phone. Lots of opportunities. I'd like to just move on now and talk. You've mentioned about mental health first aid. For those people who are not familiar with that, what is it? It's one of those terms that you feel because it's called first aid. We know but mental health first aid. So what does that include, and how can people develop their expertise in this area?
Yeah, so it's essentially an easy way to think about it is comparing physical first aid with mental health first aid. Physical health first aid, mental health first aid. And the thing that I teach, so if one was taught physical first aid, essentially you're being taught to notice, well, obviously the injury, but then what might be the methodologies to handle it. So you could put a Band-Aid on, or you call the doctor, or apply CPR, for example. So in mental health first aid, essentially what people are taught is to be able to notice the signs when someone is struggling with either, anxiety, depression, whatever the case may be. And also, so that's really important. And then to be able to have a connecting conversation. So there's a specific framework that they're taught. And also what's really important, just like in physical first aid, is how to handle a crisis situation. So the crisis situation is predominantly the biggest risks are depression-related, which is suicidal thoughts or non-suicidal self-injury. And then being taught how to actually connect in and have that conversation. So for me, it's taking scary out of the mental health conversation to be able to, connect in and do it in a really effective way. Because a lot of people, because I always ask the question, what's the big risk about asking the suicide question? Number one is I'll plant the idea in their head. And two, what if they say yes? Well, number one, the research is you'll never plant the idea in the person's head, particularly if you learn to ask the question well. When most people don't know how to ask it well, their stress reaction comes up because when someone makes a statement, and their stress reaction comes up, and then they say, "Oh, don't be so silly," or like we all care about you, etc. But you've got to really learn how to ask the question very well. It's very, very important. The other thing I'm just conscious of time, and the other thing I sort of just want to touch on at the other end of the spectrum, Lawrence, is the whole matter around well-being. One of the things that I think is really important that we need to be mindful of is a lot of organisations can fall into the trap of just doing well-being. And, happy days, yoga runs in the park and things like that. And that's a whole, nice feel-good exercise, and it's really useful and incredibly valuable. But the data is that only meets the needs of probably about 30 to 40% of people in the company. There are a lot of people in pain, like the data from the ABS and Australian Bureau of Statistics, etc. It's 20% plus of people who are experiencing a diagnosable mental illness. And they often aren't getting help and support and treatment. And we'll see their behaviours show up, and it's just like, they're the bad guys. Well, this is, again, the reason why it's so important that managers are trained in mental health first aid. So that's a 12-hour program. I have a 4-hour program that teaches a lot of that awareness and the communication skills. And then those people who are struggling, they can be connected in, with awareness around things that they can do for themselves to help them through, and then providing resilience and mental emotional fitness training for all the other people as well is really important.
Cool. Now that's really interesting. We're almost out of time, so let me just take a moment just to acknowledge you for the tremendous work that you've been doing. It does feel like, when you look back, life is a journey, isn't it? And when you're suffering and struggling as you were, you don't realize that was actually preparing you for something in the future. I think the dots always make sense in the past, but not so in the future. But what you have are some very valuable programs and valuable tools to really help leaders and managers create psychologically well and safe workplaces. And the way you think about it is really quite interesting. And I guess what we've all learned over the last couple of years is that well-being, mental health, or proactive mental health is not a nice to have. It's very much an essential and completely linked into productivity, business performance. So how can people find out about the work that you do at Inspire Learning and the different programs that you offer for organizations?
Yep. The best two ways would be my website, which is inspirelearning.com.au. The triple W's in front of it, so inspirelearning.com.au, and also Bill Carson on LinkedIn.
Okay. And one last question: Inspire Learning. Like, why do you call your business Inspire Learning? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it was. I established it years and years ago, and I was really struggling with it for a lot of years until now, probably about 2 years ago, And now what I've got really clear about is that we all need to inspire ourselves. I used to think like I had to be the inspirational one. It's not about me. It's about the capacity for each of us to find our own inspiration, which, it's like all the research is there. I'm not just being woo-woo. It's to connect with the heart. Connect with the heart. There's an enormous amount of science like heart math, etc., and start to really understand, one's purpose and essence and all that kind of stuff. And so, Inspire Learning is all about learning to inspire ourselves.
I love that. That's so good. And I love what you said about, it's almost like we're at an age now where science is proving what woo-woo has known all along. Yeah. And I do believe that when science and let's call it ancient wisdom come together, then, I think true magic and true balance can occur. So
yeah, absolutely, Lawrence. Yeah, and I know, you understand, and believe that as well. So that's, it's really, really important. And that's why, finding equilibrium, if you understand the stress brain and then get out of that through what I call, shifting into the prefrontal cortex, being, through the C's, compassionate, curious, see the comedy, see the funny side. As we do those sorts of things, then we can operate a lot more effectively in collaboration and innovation, and and then all the research is heading in this direction. People like Ed Hess and a lot of others are just really talking to these themes frequently. So we're on the right page.
We're definitely on the right page, and I think you've definitely got the right message about inspiring ourselves, because ultimately our experience of life is individual, and if we can spend every day with inspiration, we're inspiring ourselves, and of course that gives you that resilience and that equilibrium despite what may be happening around you. So and
if I've just got a minute, I'll just say this. So sometimes what can happen, and I've been there, if you're listening to this and you're going like, this is a bunch of ridiculous rubbish, because I had someone give me some feedback recently around positivity. It's all Pollyanna-ish, it's unrealistic. No, the reality is all the neuroscience absolutely talks to the critical importance of positivity, because that gets us up into the smart brain. And if you're stressed and negative and attacking, then that's a flag that you need help and support. and there's nothing wrong with that. The brain's just another body part. And so, a message to people, if they kind of think, oh, this is, a bunch of bollocks and so forth, then seriously consider, working that through. We all need rehab and support to heal our psychological injuries so that we can be the best that we can be.
Wonderful. And on that note, thank you very much, Bill, and thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Cheers.
Yeah, pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.